field of product design or industrial design is kind of a mess. Need convincing? Just try and make sense of all of this. Now, this could be just a natural consequence of the incredible breadth of things that designers create. It may be that design, an adolescent when compared to disciplines like philosophy, chemistry, or architecture, just hasn't had enough time to fully figure itself out yet. Or it could be that design sees itself mostly as a practical profession and has less interest in these deeper understandings. But no matter the cause, we should at least consider the costs. If designers can't even make sense of the discipline, then how can we expect others to? The disarray prevents a better understanding and appreciation of what design actually does and ultimately hinders what it can do. To help get its house in order, let's imagine that a professional organizer is called in to declutter and arrange all of the stuff in the world that designers create. After lots of sifting and sorting, we're left with just 4 piles: commercial, responsible, experimental, and discursive. This deceivingly simple arrangement is what we call the 4 fields of design, and it involves a different way of thinking about product design's broad scope. It's straightforward, it works with the vast range of existing objects, and it can accommodate products that haven't even been imagined yet. It can do this because it doesn't focus on the continually expanding possibilities of what objects are designed, as with traditional categories like furniture, car, toy, and consumer electronics design. Nor does it focus on how things are designed, manufactured, or used, as with approaches like participatory design, universal design, and sustainable design. Instead, this 4-field approach starts from the core: why designers design. Commercial design is centered on profit, responsible design is centered on service, experimental design is centered on exploration, and discursive design is centered on communication. Now let's look at these in more detail. It's easiest to start with commercial design because it's by far the most prevalent form, so much so that most people think that it's the only kind of design. This is work that's oriented toward and driven by the market. Success is largely defined in economic terms, return on investment. The primary intent of commercial design is to create products that are useful, usable, and desirable enough to generate sufficient profit. Take, for instance, one of the world's most profitable companies, Apple. As a multinational corporation, it provides functional and emotive products that have become staples of everyday life for hundreds of millions of people. It's often heralded as a design-driven company that embodies the maverick, visionary, and hippie soul of its co-founder, Steve Jobs. But despite its cool and innovative products, Apple would not be a company today if it was not sufficiently profitable for its shareholders. Remember that Apple at one point even fired Steve Jobs after the disappointing sales of his pet project, the 1984 Mac computer. The primary driver of commercial design is to make money. Sometimes understood as the antithesis of commercial design, responsible design encompasses what is largely understood as socially responsible design. It's motivated by a more humanitarian notion of service, where the designer works to provide useful, usable, and desirable products to those who are largely ignored by the market. While empathy for the user is common in most types of design, with responsible design this is taken to another level. Issues such as ethics, compassion, altruism, and philanthropy surround the work, whether for people in developing or developed countries. While responsible design can and often does have some relation to the market, they can be commercially available, its primary intent is not a maximization of profit or shareholder value, but instead to serve the underserved. Inspired by the high infant mortality rates within refugee camps, James Roberts designed a portable, inflatable incubator for preterm babies. It costs only around $400 compared to the roughly $47,000 price tag for conventional hospital models. But beyond expense, he considered other challenges specific to the developing world. His incubator offers compact storage, straightforward repairs, ease of delivery, excellent insulation, and it can also run on alternate power sources. The designer's goal was to offer a valuable solution to an underserved population and ultimately, in his words, to decrease the number of premature deaths within refugee camps. Tom Bieling and his colleagues at the Design Research Lab at the Berlin University of the Arts have designed the LORM glove, a mobile communications and translation device for people who are both deaf and blind. It's a glove embedded with pressure sensors that translate an existing alphabet system, called LORM, where letters are normally spelled out with one person stroking specific points on another's hand. It's a difficult language to learn, which greatly reduces the number of people that the deaf-blind can communicate with. But the LORM glove allows the wearer to send and receive emails and texts to anyone, and as a result, it empowers the deaf-blind population to engage with a wider social world and enhances their independence. Social entrepreneur Joel Jackson founded Mobius Motors to create affordable vehicles for the challenging African roads. The cars are built in Africa by Africans. The hyper-efficient design of the $9,000 Mobius 2 is focused on rugged utility and forgoes conveniences like side and rear windows, as well as any fancy bodywork. The company sources parts from local manufacturers in order to encourage regional development, and it provides financing to local entrepreneurs to start shuttle businesses. On the surface, Mobius may seem like just an automobile manufacturer, but they were founded upon and are deeply committed to the social and economic development of African communities. For companies, organizations, and nonprofits centered on responsible design, merely breaking even financially can be considered a great success. The primary driver of responsible design is to serve the underserved. With experimental design, the primary intention is exploration, experimentation, and discovery. Experimental design is defined more by the process than the outcome. In its purest form, it's not driven by an overly specific end goal of application, but instead is motivated by a curiosity or a question. Its value tends to lie in what is learned in the process more than the final artifact itself. Typically, it's an inquiry into a material, a technology, a manufacturing technique, an intellectual concept, or an aesthetic issue. Just like responsible design, a marketable object may eventually result from an experimental project, but the primary intent of experimental design is to explore possibilities with minor initial regard for achieving a commercial product. American designer Joey Reuter explores the form of the bicycle by asking questions about short inner-city travel. His 36th Street bike is an exercise in stripping something down to its core, and in the process asking, can we redefine classic objects? He eliminated key components, even the chain is gone. He says it's a statement on the bare essential transportation and new ways of thinking about material, scale, manufacturing processes, and function. He freely admits that the bike is not that appealing. It is slow, quirky, and fatiguing, but rather than a typical user-centered design approach, the project is about rethinking two-wheeled transport and exploring the limits of how stripped down it can get. Dutch designer Lilian van Daal is experimenting to see if 3D printing can replace traditional upholstery techniques. With her biomimicry chair, she investigates alternative production methods for spongy surface furniture. Despite being printed entirely from plastic, hers features a flexible seat and rigid base. She was able to create varying zones of stiffness by imitating the structure of plant cells. She says with 3D printing, you can produce very locally and you don't have material waste in the production process. You only use the material you need. Inspired by biomimicry and environmental concerns, Van Daal is not only experimenting with a new technological process, but with new types of printable materials as well. David Mellis created the DIY cell phone as an exploration into the possibilities for individual customization, making our personal electronic devices more personal. These functioning cell phones can be created from off-the-shelf electronic components, which all fit into CNC milled wood housing that each user can design for themselves. As a project that began during his doctoral studies at the MIT Media Lab, he not only has used it as his primary phone for years, but has made it open source with construction plans that have been downloaded across the globe. With the DIY cell phone, Mellis is exploring the extent to which people can make the technology that they use in their daily lives, and also how rapid prototyping processes can be used for robust finished products. The primary driver of experimental design is exploration. Discursive design refers to the creation of utilitarian objects whose primary purpose is to communicate ideas. They encourage discourse. These are tools for thinking. They raise awareness and perhaps understanding of substantive and debatable topics of psychological, sociological, and ideological consequence. Discursive design is an umbrella category that includes similarly minded types of design like critical design, speculative design, and design fiction. This type of work is generally less visible in the marketplace. Rather, it is most often seen in exhibition, print, and film, or as part of design research processes. Discursive design shares the same kinds of goals found in art, but importantly, they are objects of utility, ones that embody substantive ideas. Their discursive voice, instead of their functionality, however, is what's most important and ultimately why they were designed. Created by Julia Lohman, the Cow Bench project is a series of benches that commemorate the cows that died to create them. Each bench is upholstered with the hide of one cow, and the leather is placed in the same position as it was on the living animal. The objects are perceived primarily as animals, though they are utilitarian objects. The project attempts to collapse the distance between the animal origins of a material and its use by humans. These functional pieces of furniture were created to raise questions about how humans treat animals. An early example of discursive design, Crispin Jones and a team of interaction designers at IDEO in the UK created the Social Mobiles project. In 2002, mobile phones were not particularly popular as they began to change the experience of public space. They even ranked as the 6th least favored invention behind nuclear weapons, car alarms, and landmines. The project involved creating 5 working prototypes of extreme phones that modified users' behavior in order to make them less socially disruptive. One, for example, delivers an electric shock if the person on the other side of the phone is speaking too loudly, while another allows users to interrupt other people's phone conversations with different sounds if they're being too noisy. The project challenges industry's prioritization of the individual over collectives and ultimately intends to, quote, provoke discussion about the social impact of mobile phones. Discursive design is concerned more with communicating a particular idea than producing a market-ready product. Therefore, even non-functioning prototypes can be the final result. For example, California-based industrial design firm Carton Design created Epidermits, a speculative kids' toy that's feasible in the not-too-distant future. While actually just a model, it's imagined as a fully functioning organism, a pet of sorts, created from advanced tissue engineering and cutting-edge fuel cell and electronic technology. It is customizable with different body, skin, and hair selections, and over time, the child can also suntan, pierce, and tattoo their pet. It's a provocative project that questions the ethical and cultural limitations of technology. It intentionally pushes the limits of social acceptability and asks, quote, just because we can, does that mean we should? Now, with all these examples, you've probably noticed that the distinctions are not always so clear-cut. Often there's more than one motivation or goal for any design project. For example, James Roberts' Inflatable Incubator addresses an underserved refugee population, but in order to do this, it still needs to be marketed and sold to aid organizations. It is primarily responsible design, but it has a commercial component. Similarly, despite that Joey Reuter's 36th Street bike is only a marginally desirable experiment with minimalism, you can still buy one on his website for $12,000. And while David Mellis's DIY cell phone experiments with ways that people can produce their own technological products, he is also critiquing society's current systems of production and consumption. It is primarily experimental design, but with a discursive component. Yes, it's a complicated world. This four-fluid approach doesn't deny that complexity or attempt to reduce it, but it instead suggests how we might deal with it. The approach provides a valuable and alternative way to make sense of our designed world, by instead of looking at just what things are or how things are, it emphasizes why things are. It allows for an expanded and more sophisticated view of design that challenges the conventional assumption that products are just about providing utility and making a profit. The framework helps designers clarify their purpose as they conceive of new projects. It also allows them to be more efficient with their decision-making as they get pulled by the many competing demands of the design process. Rather than starting with the idea of designing a new phone, for example, designers can instead decide what value they ultimately want to provide. Because phones can deliver profit, or service to those in need, or interesting explorations, or important messages. And most broadly, the four fields provide useful vocabulary when talking about design. It enables more meaningful and productive descriptions and interpretations for designers, other professionals, and the general public. It is meant to help begin conversations rather than end them. Names and frameworks are powerful stuff. Our hope is that viewing the design landscape through these four simple categories, commercial, responsible, experimental, and discursive, will lead to better understanding and ultimately expand design's potential in an increasingly complex world of ideas, activities, and objects.